We are going to the world of remittances, and an interesting little development first reported by Bloomberg that MoneyGram is in talks with the Stellar Development Foundation about a possible acquisition. Now, MoneyGram, this is not the first time it has had a crypto tie-up. Famously, it was related to Ripple, which also focused on cross-border payments. That relationship between MoneyGram and Ripple was spun down in the wake of an SEC lawsuit against XRP as an unregistered security. So MoneyGram now apparently being courted by Stellar, which there's just a lot of richness in this story for the crypto OGs. Jed McCaleb is a former Ripple founder who who left Ripple and went on to found Stellar. XLM, which is the native currency of the Stellar blockchain, was initially, I believe, a fork of XRP. So there's all this sort of like interesting kind of M&A trolling kind of going on in the background here. But the big picture, of course, is remittances, right? These newfangled remittance crypto projects looking to sort of take the torch from some of these big existing players in the remittance space in what could be really interesting should this deal come to pass. I'm going to throw this to David just for some of that historical perspective. This one stood out as kind of funny to me. I'd be curious if you shared that view.
Yeah, I definitely find it interesting. And I guess the thing that plays my mind goes immediately, and this is probably more positive than the facts support, but you could consider it a case of the innovator's dilemma. If you're first through the door, you get the attention and the scrutiny, and that certainly was the case with Ripple, at least in terms of something at the scale that they were doing and as a fairly above board company. I'm not super familiar with the differences of Stellar's plans or technology to Ripple's. But it's interesting to think about. Ripple had this deal with MoneyGram at a time when I'm sure they still had tons of money, but maybe not enough to actually buy the company. And Stellar at a later stage of the crypto cycle overall, it's not as big as XRP even right now, I believe, but they all of a sudden have the amount of capital that they need, not just to ink a deal, but to actually buy outright money services business like MoneyGram, which, among other things, I'm sure has a lot of valuable licenses in place and things that are going to be to the advantage of Stellar versus XRP. So by being second, they actually got perhaps a little bit of an advantage just based on circumstantial evidence. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, it could be really interesting. I mean, just you mentioned sort of the boots on the ground and the infrastructure, and if a blockchain upstart were able to take over that infrastructure, it could be really transformative for people who rely on cross-border remittances.
MoneyGram has retail outlets. MoneyGram has, I think, a good number of retail outlets or partnerships. I'm not entirely sure, but they have storefronts, so that's pretty valuable too. Sorry, Naomi wanted to say something.
Naomi.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that you're right. The licenses probably play a huge part of this, and that's what the acquisition may be most interesting to them for. And I think, it may part be the brand, and as you said, they have a lot of outlets and they have that name recognition, but licenses probably also plays a big part. And it reminds me of the topic we covered last week when we're talking about Sam Bankman-Fried, where he's like, yeah, maybe in my future that I'll just buy out one of these Wall Street players. And it does seem like the crypto space is getting so large that it is starting to take over a lot of these payments infrastructure places that go along traditional payment rails. And I just find that really interesting, that they're not trying to like convince them anymore. They're just like, we're going to buy you. They don't need to try and vie for these partnerships and get a good deal and see if they can use their rails for their advantage. They're like, well, we're just going to buy you, and we'll let you keep doing what you're going to doing maybe, but we'll see. I just think that's kind of cool. But Ben, I'm going to throw to you.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit like, in looking at this, obviously there's some like remittance revenge going on here in terms of, the animosity between these two companies, just sort of historically. But to my mind, we've talked about MoneyGram a lot and sort of the positionality it's been in, and it's kind of pole position in a lot of ways around a lot of different remittances. And we've seen some success with crypto, I feel like, in smaller, different companies or in more regional kind of markets. That being said, I and maybe this is ignorance on my part, but I feel like, sort of the supply chain transparency demand that we talked about on the last show, like remittances are kind of a part of that conversation too, in the sense of it's been sort of this like shining beacon of what crypto could do, but it's really not gotten there yet. And this MoneyGram thing is just reminding me of that. And so I wonder if we're just going to see this kind of thing keep going back and forth, or if there's really going to be anything sort of delivered as a result of this. I don't know. I'm just seeing comparisons there because I just haven't seen a whole lot of traction in the space on the scale of something like MoneyGram, even if the promise is there.
I think eventually, Ben.
MoneyGram. I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Go for it, David. No, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say the other interesting thing about MoneyGram is that as they're a remittance business, so a lot of their customers are, lower income, and so if you're a Stellar, maybe that gets you looking at offering other services as part of that network, including maybe banking. So speaking of things that have been on the horizon but not come to pass, maybe they're going to bank the unbanked. Who knows? Anything's possible.